Listen to Systems Across Regions, a podcast produced by Talpiot on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast.
Hi, I'm Shina, and welcome to the Systems Across Regions podcast. In today's episode titled Audit Realities, Africa versus the World, Ghana and UK Insights, we are unpacking how audit really works on the ground, especially in Ghana and the UK markets, and how that compares with more mature jurisdictions. Audits are often seen as a box-ticking exercise, but in reality, they are a key driver of financial transparency, investor confidence, and economic development. Whether you are looking at a listed company in London or a fast-growing business in Accra, Nairobi, or Lagos. In this conversation, I want to get behind standards and frameworks to hear how the Big Four navigate regulation, culture, and practical challenges across different regions, and what needs to change for audit to deliver more value. To have this conversation with me is Abigail Lanne. Abigail works in one of the Big Four. Hi, Abigail. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sheena. Thanks for having me on the podcast today.
Right. So let's get started. But before we do that, I would like you to give us some few explanations. And can you kindly explain to the listeners what auditing is and how you got started in your career in auditing?
Okay. Yeah, so there are several definitions to what auditing is, but the main and simple one is what we do in terms of auditing is basically checking an entity or organization's financial statements to make sure they are accurate and can be trusted or relied upon. What auditors we do is to perform like various procedures, things like testing transactions, reviewing documents and evidence, looking at internal controls, and sometimes challenging management's assumptions, just to make sure the financial statements are given as a true and fair picture of what's really going on in that business.
Okay.
And the reason this matters is because a lot of people rely on audited financial statements. There are several stakeholders. Investors rely on this, banks rely on it, regulators rely on it, even the wider public. Even employees rely on audited financial statements. If you're working in a company, you want to be sure that, hey, this company is a going concern, and then in the next year or two, you are assured of your employment in that entity. So several people rely on audited financial statements
Okay.
just to give confidence that the numbers you're looking at are right and can be relied upon for your decisions. In terms of my journey, I actually started auditing right out of school.
Okay.
It's funny because that's not what I wanted to do, but thanks to some friends in class, there was a particular guy in my class whose cousin was working one of the Big Fours, and he used to, brag a lot about how the sister has an amazing life, she's doing well. I just wanted to go into public sector. And he kind of like convinced me, you need to go into the Big Four. And as an accounting student, if you're in a business school doing accounting, the goal, like about 90% of my classmates, the goal was to go into like the Big Four after school. But I didn't want that. I wanted something else. But after several convincing, I decided to go in there. And I I interviewed for one of the firms, and then I got through. So right after uni, I went into one of them, and yeah, I've risen through the ranks, and now I am an audit manager in another Big Four in the UK. So yeah.
Oh, so there is a difference. There is where you started from, and then there is
Yes.
where you ended.
Yeah, so I schooled in Ghana.
Yeah.
After my bachelor's, I was business administration, accounting major. Right after that, I went into one of the Big Four. So the Big Fours, as the name goes, there are four big firms. There are
Yeah.
four big accountancy firms. And so I worked
Okay.
with one of them, and I worked all the way to become an audit senior. And
Okay.
then because auditing is kind of, global, you can basically work in any other country of your choice.
Wow.
The only thing that would be different would say the accounting standards. So in Africa, we largely go with the IFRS, Whereas in the UK, they have the UK gap. In the US, they have the US gap. So it's only the accounting standards, the framework, the accounting standards or the framework would be different based on the jurisdiction. But auditing standards are universal. We all go by the ISAs. Um, so the auditing standards are one everywhere, except every firm would tweak the standards a little bit. So the methodology. So every firm builds something called a methodology, and then we audit based on the methodology. And the methodology is in line with the ISAs, except every firm's methodology will be slightly different, but they all seek to address the same ISAs.
Okay.
So I started off in Ghana, and then 2021, I left as an audit senior, came to another firm in the UK, another Big Four firm, as an assistant manager. I worked through the ranks, and then I am now an audit manager in one of the Big Fours here. So basically, I am responsible as an audit manager. I'm responsible for planning the audits, managing a team, meeting deadlines, and making sure we deliver on high quality audits. I work on large and complex organizations. So there's a lot of stakeholder managements in here as well, maintaining and managing relationships, speaking with senior finance teams, discussing key risk areas, and presenting findings to the wider stakeholders. And honestly, what I enjoy about audits is that you get a really good and strong understanding of different businesses because you don't work on one entity forever. You just keep
Yeah.
working on various audits. So, and it gives you that, that knowledge of various industries. I've worked across hospitality, manufacturing, oil and gas, mining, so many. So that's the fun bit of it. You're constantly learning, constantly analyzing, and you are exposed to different industries, and this challenges you all the time. So that's the fun bit. Yeah, and I did in addition to being like managing the audits, I do other things in the departments. Like I'm a performance manager to a number of junior staff where I help them navigate through their career and then their goals and whatnot. And then I perform other roles as well. So that's it. Hopefully I've touched on everything.
Yeah, exactly. You did everything. So
Okay.
that was an interesting journey. So now
Yeah.
let's get right into the real details. And so we know that global auditing standards are largely uniform.
Yes.
So how does the regulatory environment in Africa affect how audits are carried out compared to the ones in the Western countries?
Yeah. So this is an interesting one because you're right. The on paper, auditing standards are largely uniform on the global front because most countries either adapt or align closely with the international standards on auditing, which is the ISAs. And that's what I was saying. Every firm would have a methodology in line with the ISAs. They'll tweak it a little bit. So the procedures you perform in Big Four firm A was to achieve a certain objective will be slightly different from the procedures you perform in Big Four firm B, but you all be trying to achieve the same thing. So maybe you're trying to establish that the cash balance of this entity is accurate and fair. But the procedures you perform to achieve that in one firm will be different from what you would do in the other firm. But you will all be trying to achieve the same objective.
Yeah.
So technically, whether you're doing an audit in Africa or in like a Western country, the audit objective is the same. Obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence, assess the risk, and issue an opinion on the financial statements. So that's the one objective that all the firms will be trying to achieve here. But where it gets different is in how audits are actually carried out in practice.
Mm.
And that's mostly because the local regulatory environment and enforcement culture slightly different between like Africa, Western countries. So in our conversation, if I say Western, I'm mainly talking about UK because
Yeah.
that's where my experience is. And if I say Africa, too, it's mainly Ghana.
Ghana, yeah.
In Western countries, and I'll use the UK as an example since that's where I work. You've got strong and very visible oversight from regulators like the Financial Reporting Council, which is the FRC. And that oversight really changes the way audit is done here because audit firms know that inspections are frequent and detailed. Files can be picked up at any time and reviewed line by line. There are real consequences for weak work. You'll be fined thousands and millions of pounds. Your license can be revoked. And the public expectation around quality audits is extremely high. So what that does is it creates a culture where documentation, challenge, skepticism, and robustness of procedures are heavily emphasized. Not
Okay.
just because ISS say so, but because regulators would, actually act on it and test whether you did it properly. Now, in a lot of the African countries, or let's say Ghana, for instance, the standards might still be ISA, but practical reality is that regulators' oversight hasn't been really there. Like, it's not consistent per se. It's not strong. So I think it's supposed to be the ICAG that's supposed to act like the regulatory body back home. But what I knew when I was there was we never saw we never saw them coming to come do any pick files and inspect, and that robustness is not there. But whereas the FRC is like really working here. Um, so what happens is so less frequent, less detailed inspection of the audit files that's back in Ghana, less pressure on firms to demonstrate high levels of documentation, and in some cases audits are influenced by local realities like limited data availability, weaker internal controls, or even relationship dynamics between auditors and clients. And I think the key point is when oversight and enforcement aren't strong, the audit quality can be weak. Not necessarily because people don't know the standards. We know the standards, but as it is, if someone is on your back, like if you do the wrong, someone is on you like a hawk,
Yeah.
you will be sure to follow the standards to the letter.
Yeah.
But if it's laxed, you know the standards, but you can literally do as you want sometimes. Um, so yeah, that level of discipline and scrutiny is not really there. That said, one moment that's really stood out in Ghana for me would have been the banking sector cleanup. I don't know if you remember that. I
Yeah.
think during the MPP government, they did this banking sector cleanup.
Yeah.
And suddenly there was a lot of attention on financial reporting and audit quality in the banking space. We saw a lot of firms who were called like who had the banks that had their licenses revoked or is it shut down. So audit firms who signed opinions on those banks, you see they were on their toes. Some of them even had to like pull out from banking audits because it's like there was a lot of scrutiny within that banking space in that time, at that point in time. So suddenly audits were more rigorous. Even some firms, as I said, didn't even want to do banking audits anymore. So in summary, I'll say standards may be global, but audit quality is largely driven by the local enforcement. So where regulators are active, like in the western parts, like say in the UK, FRC is very, very active. Audits tends to be more robust, whereas back home in Ghana, is the oversight is not consistent. So what needs to be done in the audit space right now is there needs to be like constant and consistent regulatory oversight to to boost like the quality and consistency of the quality of the audits back home.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah,
it means there's basically a difference when you look
of
at
course, yes,
all this, like the way it's the environment determines how strictly they follow all the standards, if I
yes.
get it right.
You won't even believe it. So there's in my office there's a lady in my office. She's super good. She was a when she was in audit, she's been assistant she's been a senior manager for as long as you can think of.
Yeah.
It's not like she's not qualified to be a director or a partner. She just didn't want that responsibility because if you sign an opinion, and she didn't want the responsibility because you need to ensure that you are on top of every single thing in the file, which is always hard to do as a partner here. And the partners here get more involved in the audits than partners back home, all because
Okay.
of the regulatory environment, as I said. So you want to be sure that you're on top of every single item on the file before you sign an opinion on it. And it's not possible for a partner to have seen every single item on the file. They will see a chunk of it, majority of it, the high risk bits of it. But this particular lady, she didn't want that higher responsibility because she doesn't think she'll be comfortable to sign an opinion on the financial statement if she has not looked at every single item on
Okay.
the file. So because of that, she refused to get promoted because if you become a director in the UK,
Yeah.
if you move from senior manager, you become a director, and from director you become a partner. But once you become a director, you are You become a responsible individual, and you are expected to sign on audit opinions. And she didn't want that responsibility, because if your file is taken by FRC and you're found to have done some, irregularities, not in line with the standard, with the methodology or standards or whatnot, you'll be fined. And worst case, your license will be revoked. You can't even practice. So that's how serious it is. And we don't see that happening in Ghana. No.
People
So that's
practice, commit a lot
yes.
of things that are not appropriate, and it's still okay to go to get away with it.
Exactly, because no one is on their backs. There's no regulator chasing them. There's no regulator constantly or consistently coming to them to pick their files and check what they're doing to see if it's right, and penalizing them for the wrongdoing. The only time I saw anything of that gravity was during the banking sector cleanup, which is a shame, because we didn't have to get there for us to see that there's even a regulator. You know, so there's still that big gap. There's a big gap. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that is very important for me in all of this series is the fact that we look at what is working in other regions and compare it to what's not working in other regions, and see what other regions can copy from each other, so that we can, when a body is cold and a body is hot and you bring them together, then they kind of like reach an equilibrium. Everybody is working normally. So, and that we can only do by knowledge sharing. So you talk about what's working somewhere else and what's not working somewhere else. So people who see the gap can actually learn something. So it becomes very important that we talk about it. And I'm happy that you mentioned what's not really working in terms of oversight. Like, people think that, nobody's watching, the organization is there technically, but we don't see them, so they don't carry out these oversights, and people do things and get away with it.
Yeah.
And this affects the level of confidence investors have, because you need some financial transparency. So if they don't believe that you are going to do this work well, they are going to just get away, like say, okay, we don't trust their financial systems. Yeah, so that's important. Again, so my next question to you is that what is something that is done in Ghana, for example? Because when you talk about Africa, then you're saying Ghana. And when you're talking about the West, you're talking about UK. So what is something done in any of these areas, the auditing environment? What do they particularly do well that you think other can learn from one another?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. Yeah, so I know we spoke about Ghana adopting the regulatory oversight, but on the flip side, one good thing I noticed within the African audit teams, and I'll speak from my experience in Ghana when I used to work there, is they really tend to do well with ownership and continuity of work within the team. So so say when I used to work in Ghana, and I used to have team members who worked for me. And even when I used to be an associate, when you roll off an engagement, so an engagement here is an audit job. So when you roll off from the engagement and move on to another job, somehow you still take personal responsibility for the sections that you started. When I joined, that was the rule. I don't know. It was there. So when you left to another job, so maybe you were booked on the job for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then your time is up and you've not finished working on your areas, and you move on to another job. Somehow you move on to the new job, and you still carry your workload from the old job because you've been assigned cash and bank, or loans, or whatever areas, revenue, whatever you're working on. You needed to finish it, so you carried it on. You'd be doing your new job, but you make time to work on the job, on the previous thing you're working on, just to finish it. So you would proactively create time to complete those procedures, clear your review points. So in audits, when you do your work, the senior or your manager would review. So first, I think your senior will review the work you've done and leave something called review points. Review points means that you haven't done certain things well or whatever. So there are action points for you to work on. So when what African teams do well, which I would commend, is when you move away, when they move on from the job, they still find time. They proactively create time to come and address those review notes and whatnot, and finish the areas they've been assigned. Whereas in the UK, what tends to happen more is when someone rolls off, they would, draft a nice handover email for you and give it to you with the incomplete areas, and someone new has to pick it up. And you see, it has its so this thing has its good side and its bad side, because the thing is, um from a manager's perspective, right, the African approach is great because it creates continuity, it reduces the handover risk. Because if you now hand over the work to me and a new person who has not been on the engagement at all comes, and I have to now pass on that work to the person, your leftover work, it's going
Yeah.
to take that person a lot of hours, if not even days, to understand what you've done.
Yeah.
Because they don't have an idea of your work paper. They will now have to sit down, try and understand your work paper, try and even understand the entire process again to be able to continue the work. So that handover risk, it can be very frustrating for a manager if you have to deal with that. And it generally improves the flow of the file. Like I'm not having to, and the new person comes, I raise the action points for you that you had the knowledge of, on the file, then you left me a handover. Now the new person comes and has to address your review notes. They probably have no idea what to do. So handover risk is one of the challenges that no manager wants to be facing. So that's why the African way is quite good. You don't have to struggle too much. And yeah, so the file keeps flowing. But the downside too is that that person might now be juggling two engagements. So they're on a new engagement, having to like now work on the old one.
Mm.
And that can affect quality as well, because you're now trying to do more than two things at a more than two jobs, and then your mental well-being as well. Plus, yeah, it can create like pressure and burnout. Whereas the UK approach supports like resourcing boundaries, like you're off the job and now you focus on your new engagement. But the downside too is the broken continuity, which we spoke about, someone having to pick up unfinished procedures, and it's always very challenging. No one likes to pick up unfinished work.
Yeah.
Even in this UK that they like to leave handovers, they all know that they don't like to pick up unfinished work. The new person comes, will not like to pick up unfinished work. The person even leaving you the handover, if they will move to another job and they were given an unfinished work, they will not be happy to pick it up.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of time wasting in that whole process. So if I were to summarize, it's like um so you can have the two of both worlds, right? So we can adopt the African culture where there's stronger ownership and continuity of work. I think that's a really good point. It keeps the flow of the audit, and it minimizes disruption, which is something that African teams tend to do very well. I think we are very very resilient people, so we tend to do
Yeah.
do well with that. So that's something that you don't see in the UK, and it can really be difficult managing teams where there's a lot of handovers. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that you have mentioned some of the things that we can learn, I think there is more to talk about. So maybe you should talk about the culture, the whole culture of auditing culture in Ghana, for example. Can you
Yeah.
talk about the culture? What's so interesting about the culture?
So I would say the culture is similar in the sense that audits for audit work is all team based. So you've got a staff, you've got the junior staff, you've got seniors or assistant managers, you've got managers, you've got the partners or directors all working together, to get the audit done and signed off. But where I've noticed like the real difference is the access to leadership and how hierarchy shows up day to day in the day to day working. In the UK, for example, one thing I've like personally noticed since I moved here was that like senior leaders, especially audit partners, are very, very involved across all phases of the audit life cycle. Whereas in Ghana, you probably will never see that. You never see the partner in the audit until like on like 2 days before we sign. Then it's like manager says, "Hey, let's get everything wrapped up because the partner is gonna go into the file this day to like sign off and then like review his areas and sign off." That's the only time you're probably seeing the audit partner
Yeah.
involved in the audit. So that's interesting. So, but here, right from the beginning, from the entry call, like partners are joining the call constantly, catch ups, like they are involved in every phase of the life cycle of the audit. So you see them, yeah, regularly jumping into calls, discussion, checking in on like key issues from start to finish, which was I was blown away by that.
Yeah.
And what that does is that it creates a culture where like even the junior team members feel comfortable, going to like they feel comfortable to approach senior leadership because that visibility and approachability has been created, so if there's a tricky issue like say a judgment area, they can or a technical matter, people feel more comfortable, empowered to flag up the issues early and ask questions. Now comparing that to Ghana, where like Ghana is very cultural, respect and hierarchy are very strong. So it's less common to see junior staff going directly to someone like a partner to raise concerns or issues with. In many cases, junior staff are more comfortable speaking to like their immediate supervisor or like the manager or the senior manager, and the issue then gets escalated upwards. That kind of also works here, but the way audits works here is such that generally junior staff are they feel empowered to go, even if it's not about their audits and they're working on a different audit at all, they feel empowered and just generally comfortable to go discuss issues with like senior leadership. So that culture is here. Yeah, so yeah, and to be clear, so like the hierarchy still exists in the Western cultures, but the difference is that staff are more empowered to speak directly to senior leaders. And it's not disrespectful, it's seen as initiative, like you being transparent and good communication. So overall, African culture tends to be more, structured in communication, whereas Western culture is like it's still the hierarchy is still there, but it's very much more open and accessible. And I think it's that's the way that is the style in which audit is done here, where the way you see the partners, the directors, very very involved from the start to finish. So you don't see them to be far off. We don't even have the partners and directors sit amongst us in the open space. They don't have their own offices. Whereas in Ghana, partners and directors, in fact, some of the senior managers even have offices. So you realize that every other person sits in the open space. Like every other person, up to like say manager, senior manager, sits in the office open space, whereas directors, partners sit in their offices. So you see, it creates that divide where it's quite hard for you to and managers you feel comfortable talking to the partner because you the manager, you are the liaison between the team and then the partner or the director who is signing. So manager, you sit in a comfortable space, even in Africa, because you manage the whole relationship between the team and then the audit partner. But here, even though that is there, generally we see ourselves as like kind of equal, because you even call your partner by their name, whereas back in Ghana you're calling them Mr. This, Mr. That, Mrs. This, Mrs. Like that kind of thing is so it just creates that little divide where whereas you commonly will not find a junior team member going straight to a partner to speak to a partner. No, I don't think you never even see that. So that culture, African culture is just too much respect, too much respect. No one say don't respect, but let's create a very approachable and accessible environment for everyone. It doesn't matter your level, I think. I think that just generally creates a comfortable and a safe space for people to work and express themselves and be the best of themselves. You don't hide anything. You just keep giving out because you're not too scared or stifled or anything. Yeah.
So like that kind of structure is very important for mentorship because then the leader is leading from within. You see what he or she is doing, and so it helps you to even advance in your career so quickly because they are there. You can speak to them when you have problems and everything. They see what's going on with you. I think that's what the whole environment in Ghana misses because people think, okay, I go to work, I'm the boss, but the real leadership, how you help. I mean, a leader should be measured by their success should be measured, I think, by how much they are able to influence other people to go up their career.
I agree. The impact you make. Yes.
So if you are the leader in any organization and then a lot of people are struggling to climb up the career, I mean, that's not leadership. I mean, you are not successful enough as a leader. I mean, the organization can be doing something well outside. Maybe the PR is good, but within, you don't get hold of it.
Exactly.
Recently, I was listening to Elon Musk, and he said usually an organization's product reflects the defects that are in the organization.
Of course.
And it's
That's a
true.
good one. Yes.
So whatever is coming out of the organization, the product
Yeah.
you get, the services you guys are giving will reflect whatever is happening. And that is what is even reflected in what you said in the culture, where there is no oversight in Ghana and there is an oversight here. So the
Mm-hmm.
services that both, environments give will be different because it's
Of
going to
course.
reflect the
Yes.
defects that are in those organizations. So I think, and I agree with you very much for saying that. So the next question is that, as the big four firms operate globally, how can
Yes.
auditing practices evolve so that learning flows both from the West to Africa and from Africa to the West? I think some of them is by one thing I can say to this is about the transfer of talents. For example, you have been able to
Yeah.
move across, and then now you have this demic diffusion, like you've transferred the culture of how things are done, the proper things that are in the
Yeah.
Ghanaian culture transferred. So
Yeah.
what do you think? What can be done to have this transfer of knowledge about how things are best done?
Yeah, I agree with you on that point. I'll touch on that later, but that's a really good one. And I think the honest answer is so the big four already have a structure to make transfer of learning happen. They just need to be more intentional about it being like a two-way learning. So the biggest enabler of this one would be training. So big four firms, I'm pretty sure I've worked in two of them, and I know that they all have like at least the two I worked in, which and I think the others would do. They have a dedicated learning and development function, and as part of their job is to make sure the entire firm stays up to date with, say, the auditing standards, the regulatory expectation, and changes in the firm's methodology and any updates to it. So when there are updates, for example, changes in the ISS, new quality requirements, or new inspection themes, learning teams, they develop training content or models and they roll it out globally and usually can be assessed usually it's even mandatory to do those trainings to ensure people like understand and are abreast with it. Now, in terms of making the learning flow both ways, not just West Africa, West, not the West, not just the West to Africa, but also Africa to the West. I think the firms can evolve um, in a few ways. Like first, create truly global training content. You realize that the content are usually all these Western content. Like it's more of the Western audits, though the audits are the same, but Western usually is like big, large, complex engagements. Whereas in Ghana we have usually small firms or even um a firm within a group. Always a group will sit in the Western world, whereas um, in Ghana we would always be operating in the subsidiary level. So we are always like playing the small league, and then the audits in the West are like the big leagues, and then the audits in Ghana are like the small leagues. So they should be intentional in making the content like not just Western content that gets exported globally. So training should include case studies from different regions, like the African markets, because the risk, client environments, and other challenges can be different. Because even though say the parent company sits here, but the fact that a subsidiary sits in Ghana, the environment in Ghana influences the kind of risk that company faces in Ghana. The risk they face, the risk that subsidiary faces in Ghana will be different from the risk that's say another subsidiary of that entity in say Netherlands. So maybe the group is in the UK and it has a subsidiary in like say Netherlands or Germany and some in say Ghana. The risk that the one in Germany will face, or
It's
Netherlands will
different.
face, will be quite different from what the one in Ghana faces. So the content should kind of involve some of the case studies of from the African side as well, and not just only Western content. And then, for example, in African teams, we have stronger continuity and ownership culture that can be shared as a positive behavioral practice, so that it can be adapted in the West, not necessarily copied exactly, but we can just adapt it in a certain way, just because in the West we care so much about mental health and burnout. I don't hear that being preached a lot in the audit firms
Uh,
back home. That is such a big thing here. Mental health, like some of the cultural shocks that came to me when I moved here, I was like, okay, it's quite different. But so we can adapt, that whole continuity and ownership thing without, burning out the staff and whatnot. Because I think it's a very important, good quality skill that we have back home. That whole continuity thing is a good one. Um, and then we can work on secondment. So what you said, so they can be. I think when I used to be in Ghana, there used to be secondments going on a lot, but it has probably come down. I don't know if they stopped. So the secondment was a good way to also transfer knowledge, where you have people from the African offices going to the US or the UK or Netherlands or wherever, just to go and work there for like a year or two, just to see, just to adapt to what they do here. So, and maybe take some of the quality, some of the good things we have back home, and bring it to that where they're doing the securements. Take the good stuff they can learn from them, bring it back home. So when I used to work in Ghana, I know the people that used to go on securements in the US, and when they come back, they will even hold sessions. They will hold training sessions for us, just to tell us, just to imbibe in us some of the good quality things that they learned from the US office. So that
yeah,
was a very good thing. But it got to the point where a bunch of, I probably think, I don't know, but after COVID, I don't know if there was a general massive shortage of staff in the West, but that opportunity came where you could sit in Ghana and apply to like for a firm in the US, UK,
yeah,
Canada, wherever, and then you get it, and then you go. So there was secondments were less desirable. If I could apply for a full-time role in the US or UK and get and go, why do I need to go for a secondment where I'm going to do a year or two and come back home?
yeah,
So you see, I moved here on not on a secondment basis, but I independently applied to a totally different firm from the one I was working with in Ghana,
yeah,
and I got it and I moved here. And so many of my colleagues also did that. My colleagues in different firms in Ghana did that. So it was like a brain drain thing going on
yeah,
in the audit firms. A chunk of so secondments became less desirable. So I don't even know if it's even a thing still going on right now with the firms, because I know a lot of the firms in Africa had that shock where a lot of their talents left. Um, so secondment is a good one, but as I said, I don't know if it's something that's still going on, because if people feel, but currently there's a saturation in the West as well, whereas they are not really, they're not really taking people from
yeah,
Africa anymore, because I think there was a gap, they filled the gap, so they are the saturation level now. So maybe secondment is a good thing for the firms to exploit, explore more now, or even remote coaching. Remote
yeah,
coaching or across countries can also be done. Maybe a job in the UK. They can have like a manager or a junior staff from the Ghana office be part of the team.
mm,
So certain areas, depending on the person's experience, can be assigned to that person, and the person will work remotely on it, such that the managers and the partners in the West can be offered the opportunity to coach that person in Africa. Because if you're on the team, you'll be coached, you'll be mentored and whatnot. So that can also be a good one, where you virtually have people from other countries working across on teams, and then create that whole international exposure and cross sharing of knowledge. That's not a very common one, but the secondment was a common one until, as I said, there
mm,
was the gap, and people realized that, see, I could actually apply for a full-time role
yeah,
in this country and go there. So why would I
yeah,
use my firm to go on a secondment, and the time it will be up and I'll have to go back home? So secondments became less desirable, but at least we still have people working in the firms back home, so
yeah,
they could still explore the secondment option now that there's a saturation level here, and the firms are not really recruiting anymore, or they could even explore the remote teams, remote coaching and whatnot.
yeah,
So that's a good one.
yeah.
Mm.
Great. So, for young people interested in auditing, what mindset do you think they should develop that is important in the audit industry?
Well, so I'd say most so mindset to be able to work across different regions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say you should have an open mind, to be honest, and be genuinely willing to adapt. If I tell you in my early days how I had to work hard to adapt in this country, as the cultural shocks and whatnot, so just keep an open mind and be willing to adapt. When you work across different regions, you quickly realize that even though auditing standards, like, maybe global, the way people work, communicate, and make decisions is often shaped by the culture and the environment, you know. So you have to be flexible, uh, know how hierarchy works, how comfortable people are with, like, speaking up, how meetings are run, how deadlines are managed, all these things. They're slightly different in the way it's done here and then it's done in Ghana. So you just have to keep an open mind and be willing to learn, to be fair. Even how people interpret what professionalism is, and it's all based on the culture. You might do something in Ghana and it's deemed acceptable, but you do it here and then you probably will be looked at in a certain type of way. So you just need to be on top of things and, like, watch, learn, in the early days, probably ask a lot of questions just so you know what is right and what is wrong. Don't keep things to yourself, and 6 months later, 6 months, and that thing is, it's not even forgivable in a lot of companies, even in Ghana or West or wherever. In the first, I think, 6 months or so, people know you're new and you can ask all the stupid questions and whatnot. But when you keep quiet and then 6 months or a year down the line, you do certain things, somehow people look at you like it's very questionable. So just be open-minded, be willing to learn. You can, yeah, don't think any question is stupid. People usually will cut you the slack in your early days. So make use of the early days everywhere. And even if you're changing jobs in Ghana, you move to the West, like make use of that. In the first 6 months, I asked all my silly questions and whatnot, such that I don't find myself wanting later on. Um, so when you're going into audits, especially in a global firm, you need, yeah, I'm here to learn. You need the mindset of, I'm here to learn. I'm not here to judge. Because the moment you assume like one way is the right way, you start to struggle. You can't come with your Ghana mindset and think you can succeed here. You will struggle. So a personal example for me was I used to work in one big four. I was used to that methodology. It was like the best thing I knew. Then I moved here to a different firm, and then the methodology was different. So in the initial days, it was very confusing. In the first 3 months, if I told you, like, I didn't ask myself what am I doing in this firm. I In the early days, in my first 3 months, I used to question myself a lot because I always used to question the methodology here, and I thought, like, what I knew was better than what was being done here. So it was that whole confusion and that whole distortion. I was just struggling, and then it got to a point, and I was like, you know what? I used to challenge pretty much everything in the new firm. And after a while of doing this, I said to myself, when is it going to end? The methodology is not the same, and you can't keep feeling that one way is better than or right than the other.
Yeah.
Because it's a global firm. Their methodology cannot be wrong. They are all trying to achieve the ISS. So I had to tell myself that, see, um, just open up yourself and be willing to learn. So I was willing to unlearn, relearn, and adapt, and which is what I did. And I'm so glad I did that because I embraced the new environments and I settled in and I was doing my work really well. And fast forward, I got promoted to manager. So when you move to any, so you're in Africa, you move to West, just be willing, especially if you moved from one different firm to, like, if you move from one firm to a different firm, you would go and see that things are completely different here. So if you move from firm A in Ghana to the same firm A in, say, the UK, that one you
Yeah.
can be quite okay because there's not, the only thing you have to probably adjust to will be the culture and not necessarily like every other thing.
Yeah.
Whereas if you move from one firm to the other firm, it's like, oh, I think I was in the early days, I was probably going bonkers. So you just have to tell yourself, hey, I'm here to learn, and unlearn, relearn, and adapt. I think that's the way you should be going, like, with this, and then you'll be fine.
Great. So I have a popular request, which I don't know if you, because of what you've spoken about, and that is, now that you have had the experience from different regions. And
Yes.
we have also spoken about the kind of mindset that young people interested in auditing have to develop. How about
Yes.
have you ever thought of starting a mentorship program for to be able to transfer this kind of mindset, what you've learned, to the younger ones?
Interesting, because I did think of one, but I didn't make any progress with it. So in 2024, when I was turning 30, I went to Ghana and I did this whole project. I went to a school, a girls' school up north. I didn't even know it was a vocational school, so I just went to do a presentation over, I'm big on period poverty because there are a lot of poor schools up north. So I went to an all girls school and I did that, and I was looking. I thought it was a regular secondary school, so I was looking for someone in doing business and wanted to go like my path, like go do accounting, the university and whatnot. And so I was looking for a girl to mentor. And it
Yeah.
turned out it was a vocational school. So it was obviously they were not like a regular secondary
That's
school. But then they
good.
were still very appreciative of my efforts, and the head teacher kind of pleaded with me, doesn't matter, just take one of the girls and mentor. So I have a girl I'm mentoring, but she's doing fashion designing, so it's not in my line, but she's a needy student, so I am
Yeah.
helping and mentoring her. But that was still like a goal of mine, to find someone who wanted to go this path and then mentor the person. But I unfortunately I didn't find the person on that occasion, and I
Yeah.
haven't returned to Ghana ever since because of personal reasons. But the project still stands. I want to keep doing the projects and then hopefully find people to mentor. So
Yeah.
I am open to it. I've just not found anybody.
Yeah, I
So
think you should
yeah.
reconsider it. I mean, it's a great initiative for the young ones to be able to know. It's best when I like learning from experience. So
Yes.
most of the books I also like to read are those ones that are autobiography, not
Okay.
stories that are written by someone about somebody, but
Yeah.
what the person wrote themselves.
The horse's own mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it teaches you and it cuts your journey. You are not
Yes.
going to do a lot of mistakes because they have done it. And then, I mean, they will help you correct them even before you make them. You don't have to spend like 5 years trying to correct mistakes that a
Yeah.
mentor will be able to teach you to avoid, you know.
I agree. Yeah.
So
I
it's
agree.
very important. But I have two more bonus questions, if you do not mind. Um,
Okay.
One is, when we talk about entrepreneurship and the culture of entrepreneurship, you have auditing has a role to play in there. And if you are building an entrepreneurial environment where you expect that people start businesses, then you should also think about auditing, because before you even file your returns, and with the tax office, the
Yeah.
auditor has to, audit your statements and see that it is really accurate before you can file it. If there is no auditor stamp on it, you can't file for your returns. So, but one thing you learn from most of the people running businesses, especially in Ghana, is the cost of auditors. So it
Oh.
becomes it becomes like you have a business, small business, who decides
Yeah.
that I want to start a business and I only have a startup capital of about 5,000 cities, for example. And
Yeah.
then the person ends the year and then goes and say, okay, I have to file for my returns. And then the auditor is saying 5,000, 10,000 for a small business which has not even started making profits, you know. So it becomes like that culture. I mean, people do not know about these subtle things that kind of like affects the whole spirit of entrepreneurs. That makes running a business in Ghana, for example, very expensive. I mean, when you talk to most entrepreneurs, this is really significant. So
Okay. So auditing is one of their, they feel auditing is one of their biggest expenses
yeah,
for a small business.
when you
Okay.
that's what they mentioned, and I've seen it myself also. So you kind of like realize, okay, an auditor is saying you have to pay about, they charge very, very, very large amount of money And most of the businesses cannot afford that. And so instead of these companies even registering as a legal entity to kind of like run formal businesses, they don't, because of some of these costs. And the government also loses some of these revenues, because if the
Yeah.
business is successful, then instead of them paying taxes, they will not pay the tax because they want to avoid
Yeah.
those
As
auditing
for as
costs.
for Africa, especially Ghana, I guess there's tax leaking everywhere, and that's why the country is still struggling.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. What do you think? Because if you have to, I mean, see it from my perspective, one thing I always say is that I think the government should have easily solved this problem by having a government-run audit office for young entrepreneurs or startups, and then have the standards there, and employ some of the young people who are actually now coming out of the university and stuff to work here, teach them the standards, and have them audit startup companies that are between 0 to 5 years. And once you come out of there, then you can go and have a really established auditor and then subsidize the cost of this auditing for them. So what do you from this narrative, what do you think can be done? Because it's really, really an expensive cost that everyone tries to avoid.
Yeah, yeah, you would not even want to know. I truly sympathize with the small businesses because I know they are allowed to file on audited accounts, but
Yeah.
they normally would sometimes have to get is mandated to have an audited account if you're probably going for like a finance or certain other things. So the bank will be expecting to see a audited financial statement, or you're going for a deal, maybe M&A or something. The investor wants to see audited financials. So though they can go unaudited financials, but because they're small business and sometimes they need some of these things, so they are forced to go and get audited financials, and it's not cheap, as you said. The
Yeah.
big fours, you don't even want to go there. I don't think any small business goes to the big four.
Yeah.
The big fours are way more expensive, but some of the small firms, as you said, can be charging you maybe 10,000 or something, which
Yeah.
it's so expensive for the small business. And I can't fault them, because a lot of work goes into like auditing, and the small firms that charge you that amount of money, I don't even think they do half of the job of what they're supposed to do to be able to get you an opinion.
Yeah.
um the whole process of audits is very big, like it's very robust and detailed to be able to get someone an opinion. It's not a small tax. So they kind of price themselves, like, so we price ourselves just like any other professional, like the lawyers, we charge by the hour, so it's quite expensive. um so on that bit, but as you said, it was a good point. The government has they have audit service,
Yeah.
so we have Ghana Audit Service, and they are all supposed to be auditors because that's what the name goes by, Ghana Audit Service. But what they do currently is that they audit the public institutions. So probably small businesses can come together and take this to the government. How about if the government now probably creates a wing within the audit service to actually provide audit services to the small firms and the small businesses like the SMEs, it's a subsidized cost that can help. But as it stands right now, you will not get a private individual, like you don't get private firms trying to cut down on their pricing, because it's a lot of work, and you have to get like staff. You see, we work in a team just so that we can get one audit opinion signed. We have to do a lot of procedures on various captions, account balances on the financial. We basically need to touch on every material aspect
Yeah.
of the financial statement. So it'll be hard to get private firms to cut down on their pricing. But there was a good point you raised, which I think I agree with you on the government bits. They could probably SMEs. I'm sure they have like they have like an organization or something like a franchise or something. So they could probably come together and take their concerns to the government to see what can be done on that front. And
Yeah.
that's probably going to help them.
But do you think the second bonus question is, do you think that it is possible that we can actually achieve this thing where you there is an office?
We can. We can't, because look at the number of people that get out of school and can't get employed.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure you don't be surprised, but some of the people I finished school with are still unemployed. So there's a massive pool of people from uni with this whole accounting degree, and as they don't even have a job. So it's a win-win for both sides. So say government expanding a section of the audits, Ghana Audit Service, just to provide audits for small businesses who can't afford the big four. So it's as a subsidized cost. So maybe the government is going to absorb just a small portion of it. But at least the government is going to generate some revenue from that as well.
Yeah.
So it's I think it's a win-win for everybody. Your government, you're providing a social service, let me say, to your citizens, because you're trying to boost investments in the country. So you're trying to encourage businesses, and at the end of the day, they will pay you some audit fees. But at least if private entities and private firm is charging them 10,000 cedis, and government audit service can do it for them at, say, maybe 5,000 or have the cost of whatever the private firm is charging them. That's a win-win. And then you, the government, you get to create employment for the youth who are unemployed at home. So I think it's a win-win. It's actually feasible. I don't think anyone has probably this is the first time I'm hearing it from you, to be fair.
Because I was trying to look at what could be the solution if, you have an office. I was thinking whether there's a possibility of having such an office, because if you have it, then you can define criteria that you are a startup who have just started for the last 5 years, and you are not making revenue up to this amount. You can actually bring your statements to be audited in the office, and we subsidize that until it's 5 years. After 5 years, you cannot bring it there again.
Yeah, because I was thinking about that, because there needs to be some form of limitations as well, because you get a pushback from the private firms as well, because if they were to go perpetually to government to have their accounts audited as a subsidized cost, then the private sector too will say, you're trying to kill our business, because if these small businesses don't come to us for us audit them to get money, how do you want us to make money to pay taxes? So it should be in the early phases of an SME, because it's say in the first 3 years they're bound to make losses, so they're struggling. But as you said, it can be extended to 5 years. But we all know in the first 3 years of a business, you're bound to be struggling and be making losses. So I probably would say in the first 3 years they're struggling a lot, such that they need that intervention. So the government portion of, say, the audit service can do the audits for them as a subsidized cost, because first 3 years of a business is already like the very tough stage of the business. So I would have probably said 3, but at least it shouldn't go beyond 5 years, because you'd end up having, like, there's going to probably be a pushback. So those measures should all be in place so that it favors everybody. It favors both the private sector, the public, and it creates jobs for the youth.
Exactly. So Abigail, thank you so much for having the conversation with me.
It was lovely, and thank you for having me.
Every single part of it. I think when we do this and have people share the story of what can be done and done well, then I think the world becomes a better place to be. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I did enjoy the conversation.
So how can people find you on LinkedIn or something?
Yes, so my full name, I'll give it to you. I don't know, when you put out the podcast, you can probably just put my name there.
Maybe
I'm not your avid poster on LinkedIn, but at least they can always connect with me and discuss anything they want with me.
All right.
So
thank you.
Yes, thank you so much
for the conversation.